my mother wanted me to be born at my grandmother's house. So she came down to have me, if you can understand, because her mother was going to look after her.
Oh, I see. Yes.
They did that in those days, had their babies at home, you know.
Yes. Well, yes, so did we have our
And so my father was away in London and mother was down in Market Street with her mother.
Right in the middle of Weymouth.
Right in the middle of the town. Do you know Weymouth at all?
Quite well, yes, quite well.
But when we came back to live in Weymouth, we lived in St Albans Street, which is directly in line with the Alexandra Gardens and the promenade.
Very well.
So yes. We're in the town, right in the town, and when the war started, I was 9-year-old, you didn't really take, and I was an only child at that time, you didn't really take much notice, except you realised that there was something going on that the grown-ups, will say, were seriously talking. My father bought a wireless. We didn't have one, and it was the round Bakelite ones that go for a bomb on, you know, Antiques Roadshow now. I wish I had it. And he bought the radio, and we used to listen to Itmar and things like that. But
what was it, Margine?
Oh, it's that man again, Tommy Hanley, which people, you know, it was the thing at the time.
And it was
a comedy, yes. And that is what I can remember listening to, you know. And of course my father and mother wanted to listen to the news, but at age 9 you're not really interested in the news. And also I had uncles that lived in the town, because my mother was a real town person, if you can understand. And they would all go round to my grandma's at 10 Market Street and talk about it, you know, what's going on and everything. And then gradually you realise that it was something serious. The sweets were short, you know, rationing.
You'd notice that as a 9-year-old.
Yes. Now my father, by this time, had come down from London, and we lived, as I say, in St Albans Street. And he had a shop over at Westham, and which he closed down during the war, at the beginning of the war, not because of the war, but because it was a council house estate and the people wanted everything on tip. And that wasn't the way my father, who was Woolworths trained, worked. So he was out of work, and next door lived my Auntie Beat, and her husband had been in the Navy in peacetime, but he had retired. And my father and my Uncle Cyril, they went to sign on at the Labour Exchange. And one of the jobs they were given was to go over to Portland to build the boom defence. And
What was that?
Well, I think it's an iron mesh curtain, like a net curtain that comes down, and it stops U-boats coming into Portland Harbour. Can you understand?
So that was always a risk, I suppose.
And my father and Uncle Cyril were given the job to go over to the boot to and of course my father, who had been in business, and my uncle next door, when they got there, the man in charge said, "Hey, you two, off with the ties. I'm the only one that wears a tie here." And my father and my uncle, they used to come home absolutely whacked because it was, you know, hard work, physical hard work, you know, they weren't used to it. And after that job, my father then, he went into the Ministry of Labour and National Service after one or two other little jobs, and that's where he stayed for the rest of his working life. But things then were altering. There were big shelters built in streets, just brick square shelters, but obviously not for bombs, but for shrapnel. You see, people could, because this is one of my first things. My mother would say to Dad, "Oh, they're coming again, Ted," because you could hear this dreadful noise of the MT boats in the harbour. They were revving up their engines, and it was a noise. It was really deafening because we were really next door, if you can understand. Close. And they would rush out into the bay, bang, bang, banging away. It was dreadful. Then we'd hear the siren go.
So what are the MT boats?
Motor torpedo boats. They were.
But they were shooting up at the aircraft.
Well, they were making, I suppose, we were indoors, they were making all this noise. They must have had a previous warning that this was happening because the siren hadn't gone. Then the siren would go. And also there was huge guns over in the Nothe, on the Nothe Fort, and they were banging away. So obviously there were planes coming over the bay. And terrific noise. Didn't see anything much. Of course, we were indoors. But as soon as the all clear went...
So what did you do when it happened? And when the noise started, what did you do?
Mother used to... We had a big dining table. No shelters at that time. And of course, we didn't have a garden there. But my mother put... I think not sheets, because obviously they weren't, but blankets, we'll say, over the table, and me and Twinkie the cat went under the table. And it was remarkable, really, because Twinkie would come out, my mum would say, "Oh, all clear," and it was quite true. Whether the cat, I don't know, but it did happen. And so I stayed under the table while all this was going on. And even when they dropped bombs, I suppose over in Portland, you could feel the crunch on the ground, you know. But funnily enough, I can't remember being frightened. There was Mum and Dad. You know, it was just that I was under the table, if you could, you know. But then us children would run out quickly when the all clear went to pick up the shrapnel, which was still warm. Yes, I don't know what we did with it. Big chunks of warm, so it must have been overhead to come down.
And so that happened on...
This was early in the war.
But that happened many times?
Oh, quite often, yes. Because I think Weymouth, before London, I think we caught the packet then because of Portland. And then things started to go along. We had evacuees billeted on us.
But let's just slow down a little bit.
You asked me.
So we're probably talking about 1940 when this bombing has started.
No, 1939, wouldn't it be?
1939?
Yeah, early, very early.
Oh, right.
Oh, yes, we weren't prepared. They were crying out for metal to build Spitfires. And my mother and I Well, Dad was in his shop over at Weston. Mum and I, we didn't have any like wheelbarrows or anything like that, but I had a doll's pram and Mum said, come on. And we went around the houses, knocking at the door, asking if anybody had saucepans and coffee pots and things to give to make Spitfires. Mother took a hammer, and if anybody, well, and if people were generous, she would show them that she knocked holes in it, that she wasn't going to, use them or.
Use them.
And we put them in. I'd push the little doll's pram, and we filled the doll's pram. I don't know where she took it.
That's a very vivid picture you're painting there.
Yes, it was just. Of course, Dad was away.
You were still 9 or 10 at the time.
Yes, and we would go and collect another thing for the doll's pram, because that was the 4 wheels that we had. When Mum and I were very, very short of coal, because we only had one fire in the whole house, and we went from coal merchant to coal merchant with the doll's pram and brought home a bag of Coke, things like that,
Now, you would have been very close to the seafront, wouldn't you?
Oh, stone's throw.
So what was the seafront and the bay like at the time?
Well, they were wire, barbed wire, all along. So you couldn't go on the sands anymore. They said that there were landmines there, but I don't think there ever were. I think it was just to keep people off. Barbed wire. Later on, they had built like a barricade of ironwork. That was to keep from tanks coming up, because Weymouth, you can imagine, easy as wink.
To do a landing.
Yeah. So that was that. So the promenade, so the sands were out. And of course, when we had the Acton County schoolboys billeted on us, Mother thought they were going to be small, but they were big lads. And the schoolmaster.
So we're probably moving on to 1940 now.
This is early in the war.
So evacuees started arriving.
Yes, and we had 2 boys and the schoolmaster. But my father could see that these 2 boys were unhappy with the schoolmaster there, and I've got a feeling that Dad went to the authorities to say, could the schoolmaster be put somewhere else, because the boys would sit at the table. It was different when the schoolmaster had gone, but they, funnily enough, that was the first time my father had ever seen Monopoly. The boys brought it, marvellous, Dad used to sit up and play with them at night. I didn't.
These are older boys?
They were older boys, yes. My mother thought they were going to be little boys, No, they were strapping boys, long trousers. No.
So do you remember how did she have to go along to a meeting and
No, I think they just came down and knocked the door. It was the same when we lived in Dorchester. We had 2 commandos. More or less, how many bedrooms have you got? How many of you are there? Well, we had 3 bedrooms, so you had 2 commandos. I don't think you were asked, would you like them or not? You had them,
And so was it quite nice from your point of view, having two big boys joining the family?
Yes. Well, yes, it was. One of them was quite friendly. I can remember Leonard Thompson. He was quite friendly, but you see, I was only 9. They weren't interested in me,
teenagers.
If you know.
He
He used to draw, actually, very nice, and I've got a picture in my album. And he used to draw me. I used to sit there while he drew me. and I haven't got any of those pictures. But yes, they were quite okay. My auntie next door, they had two as well, and they were terrors. I mean, they would smoke and up in the bedroom, but ours were quite well behaved. And but then they went home, and funnily enough, that was when London they used to get the bombs up there. We had more bombs in Weymouth. They went back to Acton County, and really they went into the bombing, you know.
So they came down to Weymouth and got bombed, and then they went back to London and got
Yes,
bombed.
yes. So, but that's how it was. Once, when the bombing started in London, we didn't get so much in Weymouth, if you can understand. But as I say, we didn't have an air raid shelter, but the people opposite had cellars. And Mr. and Mrs. Cridge, in their cellar, deck chairs, and they invited the neighbours to go down into their cellars. So we would go down there when the siren went at night. My father and my uncle, they would stay up above because of incendiary bombs. Because if you were in the cellar, you wouldn't have, you know, and we had this tall house, and it was up in our attics, we had skylights or fan lights or whatever they're called. And Mum and Dad, in the early part of the war, they would go up with their binoculars and look through the skylights, and they could see the dog fights over Weymouth Bay and Portland because, you know, looking through. And
had a good view from up there.
One particular day or evening, Mum and Dad were up there. It must have been a Sunday because my grandma was going to have lunch. The siren had gone. We didn't have a shelter. Mum and Dad sat, my grandma and I, on the stairs because that was the part of the house always seemed to be standing if a house was bombed, the staircase. And Mother thought that was the safe place. So Grandma and I sat on the stairs, Mum and Dad up there, and suddenly Mum said to Ted, down, come on down. They're dropping them. She could see the doors open and the bombs coming out. They flew down, and they never went up there again. They flew down the stairs. In fact, my father gave the binoculars to the government because they were crying out for binoculars and things like that. And he gave because I can always remember my mother saying, they never sent those binoculars back, did they, Ted? Well, I expect they were in the bottom of the ocean, don't you?
Well,
you know,
somebody's had them.
But that was Mother. She was a little bit never sent those binoculars back. And
all the pots and pans.
And also, I can remember that there was some machine gunning along the promenade. Now, I don't know what that was about, but I know one bullet went into the public house, which was on the corner, through the window. You could see the bullet hole. And after the war, when my father had the builders to look at his roof, when the builder came down, he said, I expect you know, Miss, or did you know, Mr. West, you've got a bullet hole through your chimney. So they must have, I don't know what they were after on along, but you see, a lot of things happened that they would drop their bombs when they were going home, not to take them back, I suppose, to Germany.
They wanted to get home quick.
They would just drop their bombs. And I don't know what they were after, machine gunning along the promenade.
Were they actually strafing the promenade, or do you think it was random bullets?
I don't know what it was. These must have been rammed, but I can remember that there were people talking about the machine gunning along the promenade. I don't know about that. But that was my early record. You know, I remember those sort of things.
It's a very vivid picture.
You know, and of course then the rationing came, that we didn't have sweets. Father, when he closed the shop, I suppose he knew that there was a shortage coming. He had brought sweets, so I was never really short of anything like that. But, and then we had a Morrison shelter, and that was in the kitchen. But I can never remember having to go in that Morrison shelter. So I think...
Can you describe that? What was that like?
Well, it was just like... It was metal sides and wire sides. It was just like a big cage. That's what it was like.
Or a big table.
You know, my grandma and grandpa, who lived just around the corner once again, I had two grandparents in Weymouth, they used to sleep in theirs because they had to go up and up and up stairs and didn't have an electric light up there. So they would sleep in their Morrison shelter on a, I suppose they had a mattress and everything. And then you see Grandma would use that as her table. Ours was in the kitchen. I can remember underneath the table, but I can never remember going in to, I think that was when it more or less eased off of Weymouth. And then my father, Ministry of Labour, he was sent to work with the medical board in Sydney Hall. And Dad would, I think, take notes and things for the doctors. And one night, I can remember it so clearly. Oh, now, we had by this time my mother and father brought a bed settee, and we slept downstairs. Me on a small single settee, and Mum and Dad in the bed settee in the front room. And an uncle who worked at Whitehead's, he came round to talk to Dad. And I was, of course, there, not asleep, listening, I expect. And suddenly he said, "Oh, listen to that, Ted. It's not one of ours." And with that, there was an almighty bang. And that's when they dropped the landmine on Chapel Hay. And it absolutely flattened Chapel Hay. And I don't think that was a German plane, that was an Italian plane. And the landmine, or the mine, came down, and they said in a silk parachute. So it just floated down, and that one mighty bang. And I think that's when the windows and doors were blown out of the Sydney Hall, and Dad was transferred up to Dorchester office and the medical board to the WI Hall in the High Street. And my father then, he realised that when he was coming up and down, you can imagine the train service and the bus service was really, you know, unreliable, we'll say. And so Dad kept his ears and eyes open, and he heard of the house in Allington Road where the lady and the gentleman, they took on the job of being fire watchers at the Midland Bank. In those particular days, you had to, if you had a large, important building, you had to have somebody sleeping at night because of incendiary bombs. You see?
We're talking about Dorchester now.
Yes, this is in Dorchester now. And their house was vacant, and my father was able to talk to him, I suppose through the Ministry of Labour, you know. And we moved up into Allington Road, just renting the house for the war only. Because the people, obviously, once the war was over, they would want to come home, you see.
So you left the house in St Albans Street?
We, to my auntie and her family from London, because my father was a Londoner, really. And they had come down, my cousins from Middlesex, and they were staying with my grandma west around the corner, and obviously was the house empty, and they were there for the war, okay?
And so I guess that house is probably still there in St Albans
Sorry?
Street. I guess the house in St Albans Street is probably still there.
Oh, it's still there, yes.
And how far down would it have been?
It was, I should think, about 100 yards from the Alexandra Gardens, Neil.
Yeah, perhaps a little
Yeah.
bit less
And
than that.
so if you're coming from the gardens, which side was it on?
Oh, well, going up to the gardens, it was on the right.
It was on the right.
Yes.
Going up to the gardens, it was on the
Yeah,
right. I'm with you.
What was the number, Mum?
number 2,
Number 2.
2 Upper St Albans Street. Yes, because that's where when I used to go and play there. We had no garden, and I would go up there and play. Couldn't go on to the sands, so into the gardens we used to go with our dolls' prams. But
So it's a lovely spot to be, actually.
oh,
in Weymouth.
oh, very nice. You know, within spitting distance of the beach.
And then presumably you'd see the trains coming down to the harbour.
But you see, yes, there was that. But when we came to Dorchester, then the other part of the war that stays in my memory, because I went down to the technical college for a commercial course, and we had to catch a train every morning, and to the technical college. The war was still on, but
So you're in Dorchester
yes,
now,
but
and you're going down to
Dorchester.
Weymouth.
Dorchester was a different kettle of fish altogether. I can never remember what the siren used to go, but I can never ever remember bomb dropping. It was a different war, if you can understand, in Dorchester. Anyway, us children, we'd catch this train, and of course some days it was late coming from London through. When it came to D-Day, of course.
Well, so let's just. So when did you move to Dorchester? When did that happen?
I would think, I can never quite remember, but I would really think 1943. Now, when we lived, going back to Weymouth, of course, this is another big occasion. I can remember going to school, the school gates being locked, and notice up there, no school for further notice. We looked through, and it was full of French soldiers, not English soldiers, French soldiers. And they were also in the Alexandra Gardens, because there was a theatre there. And Mum would go up there, and she would write postcards, because they could send them free, to let their people know that they were safe. And they would take up sweets and cigarettes and things, and we'd stand on the wall of the Alexandra Gardens and talk to the men, you know. But
what were they like?
They were mostly Free French, yes. And
very pleased to see you.
Well, of course, happy to be rescued, you know. But
So that must have been 1940, I suppose.
Sorry?
That would have been probably 1940. Would that about Dunkirk time?
Well, that was Dunkirk. That was Dunkirk. They were brought over into Weymouth, but they were mostly French soldiers in Weymouth. I don't know why.
So did you see lots of boats coming back from France then?
Well, you see, I was only 9. I wasn't allowed out far, so I wouldn't have noticed that sort of. But of course, I used to go up with Mother when she was sending the postcards and things for the soldiers. Do you know what I mean? And of course, going to the school gates, finding them locked, no school, delighted. Looking through the.
So which school was it?
St Mary's Infants, or St Mary's Girls' School. Yes.
Where was that?
That's in Great George Street. Do you know it? Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the library now down at Weymouth.
I remember it.
Yes, it's the library.
I remember the school.
Yes.
What were the soldiers like, Mum?
Sorry?
What were the soldiers wearing? What were they like?
Oh, well, poor souls. Some of them didn't have uniforms. They draped in blankets. They didn't have, they were weary, worn out, you know. Most of them had, I can remember the tin hats on, but they came as they were. If you know, they were a poor lot, really. I don't know if Mother took other things down there. I really don't know. But I can remember that she did this. Dad, well, of course, was working.
And presumably they would have been sorted out and then shipped off to, wherever they were going to end up to stay before.
I don't know where they went. I just don't know where they went. And at one time when we lived down in the early part of the war, after the bombing, my mother also had a little school in her front room. The head mistress, Mum, of course being Weymouth, they knew each other. And she said, do you mind if I bring, and she brought about, I suppose about 10 small children, and they had a few lessons in our front room. But I caught scarlet fever, and my mother didn't know. My grandmother said, oh, that girl's got scarlet fever. My hands and feet were, they were something like
You had a rash? You had a rash, probably?
yeah, and my grandma said she's got scarlet fever. When the doctor came, I was over most of it, and he said as long as Mother disinfected everything I touched, but of course the little school, that was right out. So that finished. But these are little things that happened, do you know what I mean, during the war. There was really more going on at Weymouth that first part of the war. Then when I came up to Dorchester, I was about 13, so I would think it was 43, because I went to the school in Dorchester for a year, and then the rest down at Weymouth. And I can remember D-Day, the trains were really, really late. And when we got on they were full of soldiers. And they would open the door, grab us children in, and sit us on their kit bags to get to, it was absolutely crammed back. They were going obviously down to the harbour or to Portland. I don't know where they went from. But the trains then, it was, so we knew that was happening, you know. But in Dorchester, underneath, like South Court Avenue, where they had all the trees, prior to D-Day, it was absolutely full of lorries, cars, all hidden underneath the trees. And they were there, And then one day, gone. That was, and also...
Do you mean Queen's Avenue or do you mean...
Oh, Queen's Avenue, South Court Avenue, all those avenues where there was the trees.
Where they could...
Natural.
Where they could hide.
Yes, natural, you see. And, of course, the Americans had come. And they had, down on the cross, and all they had their police, you know, and they were going on and on, all these lorries and everything, all going Weymouth way, all to the port. And the tanks would come along, and one morning, the sky absolutely black with planes and gliders. Now, they couldn't fly high. They were low. It was just like a blanket. Everything was going over for D-Day. And Mother said to Dad, I think something's happening, Ted. You know, it was black with these gliders.
When you were about 13, or when you were 13, you moved house from St Albans Street up to Dorchester.
Up 4 Annington Road.
So from 1943 onwards, you were living in Dorchester.
Yes.
So what was life like in Dorchester in 1943?
It was quieter than Weymouth, of course. We didn't have there was an air raid siren because that was up in Daubany's Barn, up near St George's Church. But the funny thing was that happened then, Mr. Daubany had his farm. Do you know St George's Church?
Yes.
Well, it was nearly next door, going down towards the hill.
Yes.
Where there's a little with flats now. My friend Gillian lived there. And Mr. Daubany didn't drive. So he had to go to the London Road to catch, to collect the cows, which were in the field, in the road, and bring them back to be milked up the top of the hill twice a day. And you can imagine the whole herd of cows plodding along, and American convoys wanting to go. And you can't hurry cows, can you? And they would plod along, dropping their drops, you know.
So he drove his cows all the way from London Road up to Fordington?
Yeah, yes, twice a day.
And back?
Yeah, to be milked there and back. Yes. And you can imagine the upheaval because the convoys, and mostly American, were coming over Gray's Bridge, along there, and I don't know where they went, but they went towards Isom Way. They would have gone, I suppose, up to...
Harringston Road?
Well, up Allington Road. Would they go past Allington Road, or did they go up King's
No, King's Road.
King's Road.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So they would either have gone, I think they went straight on to Prince of Wales Road.
Yeah.
And then to Weymouth.
Yes.
Yeah. But they were definitely coming over Gray's Bridge, and there was the cows plodding along, and all the Americans, you know, behind. There was a couple of Americans posted at Fordington Cross all the time to direct, because, you know, it is going always there.
And would there have been any traffic except for the Americans? Was there any other traffic?
Well, there wasn't. People didn't have cars much. I don't think you were allowed to buy cars in the war. I know as soon as the war was over, my father bought a car, but I don't think there weren't many cars. There weren't many cars.
So traffic was all military.
at that particular time.
And it had to contend with Farmer
Mr. Daubeny,
Mr. Daubeny
yeah,
and his
cows, twice a day, up and back.
How many cows did he have?
Oh, quite a herd, yes. It was.
Must have driven them mad.
It must have. But he had to do it. He had no milking parlours down at London Road.
And so where exactly was the farm in Portington?
Up the top of the hill. There is a little an estate there now, isn't there?
Yes.
Of flats and things. The house is still there.
It's called Church Farm, I think it was.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Up past the Bull Inn, of course.
Yes.
Oh, it's the other side of the road.
Yes.
Yes. Up there, and he never drove. Sometimes he had a wagon that he would take, but it was the slow cows. And I mean, all the honking, that doesn't matter, does it? You know. No, it was funny, really.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So, you're in Dorchester. It's 1943-44. What was your life like then?
Well, it was really very restricted. There was nothing much you could do. Do you know what I mean? I went to school at the
Modern school.
yeah, secondary modern, wasn't it? But I only went up there for a year before I went to the tech, you see. So then my life was different because I was up in the morning catching the train to Weymouth every day. So I wasn't really much in Dorchester during term time. And you see, my sister was only very, very small. My father was quite strict. I mean, he didn't like me chewing gum, for one thing. Where did you get that? See, the Americans, they were everywhere. I belonged to the Girl Guides. My patrol leader, she used to leave the Girl Guides. She would cycle up to Cane Woods, where the Americans had underneath the trees, had their cookery place. I don't know why she went up there, I'm sure, but she used to say, will you come? Oh, I couldn't, because my father, he was very, very, you know.
He wouldn't have liked you going to see lots of American soldiers.
She went up there, oh, they'll give you gum, they'll give you this, they'll give you that, you know. She used to fly off from Girl Guides up
there. So did she give you chewing gum?
No, well.
Where did you get yours from?
They used to, as the convoys went through, they used to throw it to us, to the children, and just sweets, and they were very generous, you know, sweets and gum. Gosh, if Dad saw me chewing gum, where'd you get that from? You know, oh dear. But
so what did Dad think of the Americans?
Oh, not much. No. He was very protective. Do you know what I mean? You see, we were 15-ish now and starting to grow up. Do you know what I mean? And no, he wasn't too keen. I had, when I was at the tech, our teacher, she said, would we have some American pen friends? Well, I had two, a girl in Brooklyn that I used to write to, and this fellow, and I forget where he lived, but you see, he sent a photograph. There he was in military uniform. That was it. Father, no more. Didn't mind the Brooklyn, but not. No, Dad was, you know. I don't suppose he was. He didn't say anything against them, but he just didn't like me talking to them, you know.
Understandable, I guess.
Yes.
So, did you ever see any black Americans?
Oh, yes. They kept, of course, these up in Cane Woods, they were black. The cooks up there, they were black. And yes, we did. Things like this. We used to go to Salisbury Fields to play. They've got the swings, you know. of course, in the war, the grass wasn't cut, okay? And it grew quite high. Now, the grass in, let's say, Mornbury Rings, they used to put sheep up there. They would nibble, but not in Salisbury Fields. High grass, black Americans with English women in the grass. Us children on the swings, you know. So that we used to notice, but it was nearly always the black Americans, you know. Yeah, but we didn't, I don't suppose we saw black people very much before. I only remember in Weymouth one black family, and we used to call him Darky Pierce. He didn't mind. Him and his sister, Darky Pierce, they didn't mind. But you see, we didn't ever think anything odd about that. I had a black doll. We never really, and when the black Americans, it was strange because we didn't see many black people, but we didn't feel hostile, shall we say, against them, you know.
You never got to know any?
No, oh no. No, none. Oh. Now my cousin at Weymouth, and she got friendly with, but she was a bit older than myself. She got friendly with an American, and they were friends for years and years. And she used to go to America with her husband, Curtis, to see him, you know. So they did make friends, but I was just that much younger, 15.
So going back to Weymouth, excuse me, your sort of horizons are opening up a little bit, weren't they? Because you were I'm throwing my throat.
Do you want a drink of water?
No, fine. So you were going down to Weymouth every day to college.
Yeah.
And so you got friends in Weymouth at college.
Oh yes, yes.
And so, did you enjoy that? The fact that you lived here, but then you were on your own going down to college every day.
Yeah, well, I had this friend, you see, Gillian. There was the two of us, you see, and yeah, we it was good fun really, because we'd stay on the station, we'd have to. In those days, it was so different because we took a shortcut across the lines, the railway lines. You know Dorchester. What's that wooden house that's built? You know, the new...
Bridge House on Colourful.
Yes. You know where Bridge House is? Mm. There's a gate at the side.
I know.
Now, we were allowed to cross over the railway lines to get to the southern station. We wouldn't be able to do it now, but the assistant chief constable used to do the same, so nobody could tell you off about it. Sometimes the train would come along, we would shout to the driver, wait for us, while we ran, and now they've just put in the echo about opening the subway between the two stations. We would rush down the wave to the train driver, it's okay to go. This is a London train. They would wait for us. We would get on and off we'd go.
And these were all steam trains, of course?
Yes, of course. Yes. Yeah, Lord Nelson class. Yeah, I remember it. Well, yes. But you see, we would wait sometimes on the station, ages, because trains coming from London held up, different reasons, you know. It was sort of touch and go all the time. The teachers didn't mind. They knew that, you know, we were hung up. So it was a bit, you know, happy-go-lucky sort of thing.
And what were you learning at college?
I shorthand typing, a commercial course, bookkeeping, you know. The bookkeeper bookkeeping teacher said, had I ever thought of being a waitress? I was no good at bookkeeping at all. Yes. Have you ever thought about being a waitress, dear?
Did you ever get the little train on from Weymouth to Portland?
No, no. Not in those days.
That was later.
When I'd left school when I went to Portland. Yes.
So just tell us about that though.
Well, because you see, it must have been after the war, because of Portland Fair. No Portland Fair. All things like that had stopped, and this was something new. And my friend Gillian and I said, "Oh, let's go to Portland Fair." And of course, we had free tickets. Oh no, I didn't then. But anyway, we went to Portland Fair, and it must have been after the war, because during the war, no Portland Fair. And this is another thing. During the war, D-Day, when we were all celebrating, we still lived in Dorchester. We went down, Mum and Dad and I, and Jennifer, we went down to my grandma's. And I can remember doing the Pally Glide along the promenade on D-Day night. They put on the fairy lights, because in Weymouth they used to have fairy lights, not during the war. So somebody must have known everything was coming to an end.
This is VE night, not D-Day. VE night, isn't it?
Sorry?
This is VE night, not D-Day.
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah,
Victory
VE, sorry, VE night, of course, sorry.
VE
Thank you,
night.
Neil. Yeah.
So perhaps be able to go over that again. So on VE night, tell us what happened on VE.
Yeah, this is it. We went down to Weymouth and at my grandma's, and all the lights were put on. You know, the Jubilee clock was lit up. All the fairy lights were lit up, and every now and again they had the tannoy system, and they were playing things like Deep in the Heart of Texas was one of the records that went on and on and on, and everybody was dancing along the promenade, doing the Pally Glide. You know, it's...
What's that?
Yes, it's a line of people, they all linked arms, you know, and you did the Pally Glide all along the promenade. People we didn't know, do you know what I mean? Oh, come on, join in, and the conga, all those sort of things, you know. People were dancing, it was lovely.
So this was a euphoric time.
Sorry? Yes. Oh gosh, yes, of course. Yes.
So that was your VE day.
Yes, I remember it, because you see, my father was usually, you know, in it such and such a time. That night, I didn't even know where they were. They were dancing, I expect, you know. Grandma looking after the baby, you know. It was exciting, yes.
So if we let's come back to some years later, or a year or two later, you did go on the steam train to Portland.
Oh, yes, I did,
Just
yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, that was it when we had to change. I'm sure we had to change at Weymouth, get on the Portland train. When my friends and I, you know, we'd spent our money, got it, you know, 2 boys, one of them worked on the railway, we knew, and they brought us home, of course, you know, on the train. And it was sort of switchbacks, it was Dodgem cars, that sort of thing, do you know what I mean? We had a lovely time, but of course you had to come home because of the last train, you know. But that was the only time I used that train, that particular train, to get to Portland. Yeah.
So now let's come on to, we're kind of rewinding slightly because we've talked a bit about VE Day, but let's come back to the build-up to D-Day. So Dorchester was full of Americans.
Oh gosh, yes.
Woods were full of Americans camped out. So presumably people realised that something was about to happen.
Oh, you couldn't not, because of all these cars parked along I'll say Southcourt Avenue, Queen's Avenue, where there were trees overhanging. Absolutely, people got to know the soldiers. They used to take tea and things out. They were just hanging about, waiting for the off. But the funny thing is, you see, they were there 1 minute and gone the next during the night, you know.
So how did you, when it happened, what did you see?
Well, saw these gliders going over. That was another thing. All happening at that particular time. The sky full of the planes, and they were flying very, very low because the gliders were heavy with men, of course. I think they came from Tarrant Rushton, somewhere like that. Going.
And lots of them.
Absolutely black. You know, the sky was black with them. My mother saying, "Oh, I think there's something going on," you know. And when I say tanks going up and down Allington Road, they were small tanks. Do you know what a small, well, I don't know whether you would call them, but they had those tracks.
Yes. But various different armoured vehicles.
Yes.
Yes.
Small armoured vehicles.
Yes, and they absolutely churned up the road because they swung around, and I suppose they went up to and caught the Prince of Wales Road, wouldn't they?
Yes.
But I don't know why they came. I know they came up past our house, all these small.
Well, they would have gone on some of the landing craft, wouldn't they?
Yes, they would. They weren't big tanks, these I'm talking about, churning up Allington Road, but the road was absolutely full of potholes, big, you know, when I say potholes, that's understatement, you know.
So we had this huge build-up.
Oh, yes.
Americans everywhere, and then lots of vehicles moving, and then all these planes flying overhead.
And then
what happened?
quiet. It all, you know, they'd all gone, I suppose, to Weymouth and off. And then, you know, but it was obvious something big was happening.
And when did you know that something had happened?
I can't remember
Was it
that,
on the radio
really.
or in the papers?
Well, I suppose so. Yes, but I can't remember that. I can remember them, all these vehicles underneath the trees. I can remember vividly the gliders going across. Our commandos, they used to sleep in the daytime, and they would go out at night, and I think they went to Lulworth, up and down the cliffs, training prior to D-Day. But
so who tell us who these two people were?
I know one was a very nice man. Neil's got the excuse me, the knife that he gave.
Yes,
Sort of a knife they put down their socks. Do you know what I mean? And he gave that to Dad. Dad used to take him down the Bull when he went on a Friday night. Dad used to go down to pay our Christmas club. But the other soldier, he was a big, burly Highlander. And his name was McAllister. I always remember that, McAllister. We couldn't understand what he was saying. When he talked at the dinner table, we couldn't understand. He was so Scottish. But a different man altogether. But I suppose they were there for their training, and when it was D-Day, they were gone.
And so these were two commandos who were billeted with you for
Yeah.
a period of weeks.
Yeah, going up and down, and Mother would come down in the morning, and there would be all the hand grenades and things, I mean obviously duds, but in her shopping basket. They used to put them there before they went on up to bed. Yes, because they were out all night and
Was that a shock for her the first time she saw them?
oh, she'd laugh at it, you know, but yeah.
And my grandma was very laid back, wasn't she?
Oh, she was.
Everything in her
Yeah. Oh, yes. But
So was that unusual to have soldiers staying in your house?
oh gosh, yes, and we weren't asked, you know. Well, they just, it was the same thing. I mean, how many bedrooms have you got? Well, there was just myself, a mum and dad, and of course Jennifer wasn't born then, and so we had one double bedroom free, two soldiers, you know.
And so would your friends have had soldiers staying?
No,
then?
she did. But Gillian didn't have it because she lived in the farm. They didn't have any. I don't know whether they did. If you didn't have the bedrooms, you wouldn't have had soldiers. You see.
And then presumably your mum would have got paid to have them. They would have got.
I don't know because she would have had to have fed them.
Their board and keep would have been paid for, wouldn't it?
I'm sure. I'm not quite sure. They didn't. Mum and Dad didn't. Not in front of Jean, you know. No, I don't know.
And did you ever find out what happened to them?
No. My father was quite friendly with one. As I say, he used to take him down to the ball, but never heard. It was like the evacuees. Now, the young man that did the drawing in the book, he wrote to Mum and Dad, but from a field post office. So obviously he had joined the army and was abroad. And he sent a letter or a card to my mum and dad, but never heard from him again. I often wonder if he perhaps was killed, you know. But he did write, and it was from a field post office. But we didn't know where because they didn't ever put, you know.